Hello and welcome. You're with IndiaPostLive.com, India's first live interactive web television. This is your own platform where you can engage with us and with each other as we discuss various topics. You can send us your posts, your audio and video comments. You can participate in our conversations just by clicking a participation request button. And of course, you can tweet us or your reactions on the shows, or if you have some additional inputs at #IndiaPostLive and @IndiaPostLive. I'm Nilanjana Banerjee, and today we are going to have a little informative conversation on the largest Ebola outbreak in history. I hope I'm right when I say that. It sounds very scary, I know, Ebola virus, but not too many of us really know what it is. And there have been a lot of rumor mongering that has happened. A lot of deaths has been attributed to the Ebola virus. What exactly is the virus? What are the symptoms? And should India be worried? That is what we're going to talk about. And I have with me two healthcare experts in my studio. Grateful to have them, grateful that they could take out the time to join us to give information to all of you out there on this virus. First, Dr. Bobby John. Dr. Bobby John is a public health professional, and thank you so much for joining. And of course, I have Rajesh Joshi. Rajesh is not a doctor, but he is a health professional, healthcare professional. He is one of the directors of DoctorsCabin.com. Doctors Cabin is a portal which gives you everything. It's a one-stop shop for everything that you need on healthcare, health services, and also online consultations if required. Thank you so much, Rajesh, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Great. All right. So let me include myself as one of those people who know nothing about the Ebola virus. So it's like both of you giving me a lecture. I would love to be lectured. Let's start with you, Dr. John.
So, Ebola virus or Ebola fever, Ebola hemorrhagic fever, I mean all these names that people kind of use variously interchangeably, is one among the many diseases that occur naturally among animals that have made its way to human beings. Now, animals are as prone to diseases as human beings are. The infective agents of human beings move between human beings, and the infective agents of animal diseases move between animals. So far, so good. When the animal kingdom disease agents move across to the human side, that's when we end up with strange diseases, things that we have not described or have great experience in managing, and therefore it gives rise to a certain level of fear and apprehension as to what is this. A, it's not been seen before, and B, if we have not seen it before, how do we tackle it?
Right.
And so that's essentially what Ebola is all about. Ebola is something that doesn't naturally occur in human beings. It has crossed over from the animal kingdom.
Which animals specifically?
The rodents, the macaques,
Bats.
all of them have been known reservoirs. Bats actually move the thing from one place to another.
Yes, that's why.
And so therefore this whole thing about bats being the vectors of the disease and themselves not dying out, that's an interesting thing, because usually vectors, when they die out, the disease also dies out.
Absolutely.
Bats usually don't get affected by it, and so therefore they can continue to spread it. Fortunately for us, bats do not interact with human beings all that much, unless human beings go ahead into those habitations or their habitats and end up engaging with them in ways that kind of allow for the transmission of the disease. So in many ways, if we were to leave the animal biome quite happily on its own, we should see less of these diseases jumping across from the wild into human beings. But human beings as we are, we end up fiddling with their habitats, and so therefore end up with an exposure. And so we need to see this not only as an outbreak of a pretty frightening specter of disease, but we also need to see it in the context of where human beings are right now interacting with the environment, and how we put ourselves into risk also.
Yeah, you know, Dr. John called it frightening, and definitely it is frightening, and it is also called the Ebola hemorrhagic fever. So, you know, your inputs on basic symptoms that you're aware of. Yeah.
Actually, I think I'd like to just put it in context,
Sure,
if you don't mind. I've traveled and worked in East Africa. And actually been in South Sudan back in March, which is near Central Africa, where the disease originated in I think 1976.
Okay.
And preparing, I was actually here in Delhi preparing to go there, there's a long list of health checkups and vaccinations that one needs to get,
right.
Including polio, which I got through the public health system here very effectively, actually, and Twinrix and all the rest of it. So it's very dramatic and scary if you Google this disease, or if you Google guinea worm and Buruli warts, or ulcers and things like that. But if you actually put it in context, there have been only, I think, about 1,400 deaths. So the dramatic issue is that I think from 1976 up till last year, there were about 1,200 deaths over that long period of time. And then this year, they've been as many again. So it's accelerated. It's the speed of it and the graphic nature of bleeding.
Internal bleeding, right?
Internal, and I think a certain amount of external hemorrhaging out of former needle sites and all sorts of things. So if you read it, it's very dramatic. But statistically, in a place like India, you're far more likely to die from a mosquito bite, to die from a traffic accident. So actually, India is number 2 in the world in traffic fatalities.
Yes,
2.5 lakh
we're aware,
per year. The chance of, if you go to these areas, in West Africa, East Africa, different places, and if you take the necessary precautions of washing your hands and not interchanging bodily fluids, et cetera, you'd really have to go out of your way to find it, is how I see it.
Okay.
And I took a number of precautions when I went to South Sudan.
All right, let's, in fact, we have compiled a little, things to know about the Ebola virus. And for all those of you out there who are watching, take a look at this little infographic we've prepared for you on facts to know about the virus. It can kill within 7 days. It multiplies until the viral particles are amplified to 100 million per droplet of blood. Fatality rate is 60%. Okay, though we are not trying to scare anyone, it is important that people know and people can then... There is no vaccine, no treatment. Wow, okay. There's an experimental drug which has shown promising results, but of course the safety and efficacy are yet to be evaluated. It attacks every part of the human body. Connective tissues, the ones that hold your internal organs, are primary targets of the virus. Disrupts your immune... Yes, tell me.
It's clearly something you don't want to catch.
It's clearly something none of us want to catch, which is why we're having this show, so that people understand what it is. None of us, we don't really understand a lot about it. We're just scared. What should we be scared of? That is exactly...
Here's the thing, as Rajesh pointed out...
No one knows its origin.
Right.
Okay, bats have been suspected, SARS results are inconclusive. A major part of the life cycle of the virus remains a mystery. Now, this is basically a virus of the Filoviridae family.
Right.
Right? What kind of a family is that? I mean, do we know any other viruses of that family?
The Ebola family itself has got a couple of variants around it, and all cause hemorrhagic fevers. But here's the point that Rajesh was trying to make, and I want to kind of amplify on it. It comes up on your infographic too, is that you're much more likely to die of other causes than Ebola in a country like India. Okay? Let's kind of place that first, and then kind of go on to the thing. The very fact that it's very virulent and it kills people at the rate it does is also, in a way, an indicator of what might be its likely spread. Anything that kills rapidly also runs out of the number of people it can kill, because the people that could transmit it from one person to another are already dead. So the transmission from person to person. So this is a function of virology and understanding disease transmission. So
Can I interrupt you there?
Yes.
Just hold that thought. Let me just interrupt you there. A virus is something that can exist only in another living cell, right?
Correct.
So you have said that, I get your point, that once you die, you can, but suppose somebody has died of this virus and there are these other healthcare professionals or relatives of that person who are at some level handling the cadaver, they are also at risk, or does the virus die immediately?
So there are two things here. One is of active transmission. Okay, that kind of comes down with mortality. Okay, it's a sad fact, but that's how it is. Right. The second is the handling of body fluids, tissues, including dead bodies or other animal tissues and things like that. All of them require a certain level of precaution, which usually we tend not to pay attention to, and that's pretty much where this transmission issue comes up. if healthcare workers are careful, if they're provided with enough precautions in terms of goggles, in terms of gloves, in terms of glasses and stuff
basic
like that.
hygiening, right? Basic hygiening.
If you follow very, very basic, simple prevention methodologies, the chances of disease transmission, especially to healthcare workers who are the highest at risk because they are the first line of contact, is very, very low. And so therefore, while it is frightening, and one should kind of always be aware of the possibility of transmission, it isn't as high as it's made out to be. Unless you're really messing with body fluids and tissues, you're less likely to get it than is the case is made out.
How many days does it take, once it spreads to the incubation and finally the full-fledged?
So today the life cycle of Ebola is what? I mean, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks to kind of even get the symptoms in place.
Right.
And then from onset of symptom to death, that 60% rate that you're talking about, that's pretty rapid.
Okay.
But for it to incubate, it's a while.
And there is no treatment. Once
you're in, you're not doing anything to it. You're not doing anything to it unless, I mean, this whole experimental therapies that are taking place,
no treatment.
I mean, whether that even applies to the incubation phase, we don't know.
Yeah.
So but the no treatment, no vaccination is scary.
That's what scares people.
That's what scares
and
people.
And the fact that you can be in the region, get on an airplane, end up in Atlanta, Georgia, New Delhi, Bombay, etc.
Exactly.
And then not know for a few weeks.
Exactly.
That's
and the
what
only
scares
way you
people.
can know is a CBC, right? Complete blood count.
I think so.
Yeah. You start with a basic blood test.
Yeah.
What will they tell you? They'll tell you pretty much the same thing as any other hemorrhage, any other fever, that you've got an elevated blood count, you've got things that are getting deranged. I mean, the differential diagnosis as a physician, the treating physician would entertain, would be a whole bunch of things, right from an influenza, a simple influenza, to dengue hemorrhagic fever. Okay, all of this kind of serve to complicate the picture. It's not exactly unique. There's no biomarker at this point that we are saying this is what is Ebola kind of
because
thing.
hemorrhage also happens with dengue, right?
Exactly, and so it comes in the range of hemorrhagic fevers.
Right, absolutely.
So
that is
you shouldn't want to get.
that is another. Oh yes, I've had it. Oh my God, it was horrible.
Except that the probability of getting dengue in India is far higher than an Ebola. Because the mosquito is a prevalent vector, and we have a large reservoir of the disease in the human being. And so therefore, the probability of us getting dengue hemorrhagic fever, far higher.
Far higher. But, let me ask you this, Rajesh, the India factor. I mean, unfortunately, there have been lots of rumors. Once this whole Ebola virus outbreak began doing the rounds, there was this guy, Srijit, who everybody thought had died of the virus in Karnataka's Suratkal. Right, but he apparently had died of an untreated lung infection, which was, he had left it untreated. You have rumors doing rounds, you have Facebook, WhatsApp messages doing rounds on social media that the virus has hit Mumbai, do not go to Mumbai, do not travel to... I mean, these are rumors, right?
I think the important thing is not to overreact. And even if you... I mean, I hate to put this in a general context, but I will.
Right.
If you look at what happened with the engine catching fire on the plane recently, the engine catching fire on a plane that's landing is dangerous enough. Nothing happened. It landed safely.
Right.
People got injured because they didn't get off the plane properly, because they got panicked.
Yes.
So the important thing is, I mean, the Indian healthcare system is not perfect.
Absolutely.
But I think for...
Too many of us.
I think for
I'm sorry, I just had to say it.
In dramatic emergency situations, it swings into action, and I think it can be quite effective. So, I mean, for example, it's eradicated polio.
Right.
Right. And
yes.
I mean, my experience with that.
Huge success, yes.
I mean, I had to get vaccinated before I went to Africa. I had to get my yellow fever certificate, otherwise I wouldn't have gotten back in the country.
Okay.
So back to India.
But these tremendous risks. I mean, once, of course, both of you have kind of reassured us, saying that you're more likely to die of a mosquito bite or
traffic,
malaria, dengue, traffic than of the Ebola virus. However, we have told you what it is. It is a virus. It does exist. And though these rumors are doing the round, there is no need to panic. You need to understand that basic hygiene is the prime way, the only way you can prevent it, right? But if India were to get affected, I mean, it would be a complete disaster. It would be an epidemic.
Not necessarily.
Why?
And this is where we need to be in a better place than we are right now.
Yeah.
But we are not in as bad a shape as we were maybe a couple of years ago.
Okay.
We have a heightened sensitivity about transmission of diseases across borders. there's better information flow.
Okay.
Our airports are getting modernized, which are our first points of screening, and our ports are also becoming a lot more alert to the mobility of sailors and other people via those channels. So one is the awareness. Second, the integration between the health authorities across the world right now, which serve as the information sharing portal.
Which
Third,
is again something what he's doing.
and third is a fairly alive WHO, which has got his international health regulations, which is now beginning to get all the nations together to say there needs to be a common agreement and framework to respond to disease outbreaks.
Right.
Now we saw that some nearly a decade ago with SARS and with the bird flu
Yes.
threat, which the current WHO DG Margaret Chan very effectively managed in China and Hong Kong. And then we kind of seen other outbreaks, MDR, TB, drug-resistant tuberculosis, when a person actually got on a plane with total drug-resistant tuberculosis and traveled across the United States. Now, those are scenarios that are increasingly being seen and understood in the context of Indian health authorities, and the ability to respond is being built up. Is it perfect? Not yet. Second, because of the availability of information today, even private practitioners today are able to say when they are at the limits of their capabilities. And that's an important thing that I want to kind of underscore. Not every doctor can manage every case.
That's
There
true.
needs to be a place where doctors are able to say, this is not my domain, I need to transfer it to a specialty place, or I need to move a patient to a place where there is an ability to contain the spread of the disease. And that's something that we have not yet gotten too well at, and especially in the case of a cervical case or others, what is the time lag that it took from identifying somebody who had come from a particular place, A, index of suspicion, B, identifying that this might be potentially problematic, C, moving into a quarantine kind of a thing. That needs to be more rapid. Given your comment, which is we have too many people, yes, the potential exists of explosive spread,
Yes.
but the probability is far lesser today simply because we are a lot more informed and better prepared. Are we perfect? Not yet.
All right,
I have
sure,
two
surely.
points to add.
Yeah, while you add those points, let us also take a look at another. We've again done a little bit of, because as Indians, we probably need to understand that, India needs to be more careful simply because of the numbers and simply because of the fact that, people are in close proximity to each other when you talk of the population density and all of that.
Every one of them, the modes of transmission that is showing, which is body fluids, essentially means if people are following basic hygiene,
Right.
and if they are basically aware of what not to do when they see blood, essentially prevents the whole transmission.
Absolutely. You're right, but again, the whole thing of the crowded metros and crowded trains and stuff like that is something which fatality rate of 90%. Currently, there is no licensed treatment of vaccine. Of course, that we know. Okay, is it 60 or is it 90? I think we need to just check.
It's a much higher one.
No natural immunity against the virus, internal body, and we wouldn't know how to fight it. Yeah. So I mean,
well, for that matter, I would ask whether anybody on this planet
anybody
has
is,
got
I mean,
natural
what about
immunity.
Sudan, where it originated? There is the body
No,
hasn't developed any
No, and
immunity, right?
Sudan has other issues in terms of civil war and
Of course,
things like
of
that.
course, yeah.
And I don't think there are any cases this year in there.
Yeah, this is what this is what I was, talking when I said we are too many of us. The doctor-patient ratio. This is not. We are not painting a very happy picture. I know that, but then you are quelling a lot of those fears, which is why we are doing this, so that these fears can be quelled.
We don't have a great doctor-patient ratio.
Yes, we
but
don't.
That does not mean we do not have an absolute bad ratio of healthcare worker to population.
Right.
Because it's not just the doctor who delivers healthcare. It's not just the doctor who is the portal to care within this Indian system. We have a whole range of paramedical workers down the line. So right from the ASHA worker in the government system
Right.
to the healthcare workers and the ANMs, and then the doctors at the apex of the pyramid. And then you come to the tertiary specialist doctors and things like that, the kinds that you and I may probably identify as doctor. We may not kind of say, okay, that MBBS doctor, why should I go to that person?
Unless he's an MD.
It's kind of a huge pyramid, and so therefore if you take total numbers, we're not that badly off. Now, have we empowered or have we trained people to be first responders? That's a different question, and that should be one where we should be beefing up and really capitalizing on what we have at this point in time in our hand.
So what information do you have? Has Ebola at all hit India? Do we have anybody who's...
I don't think there's been a case.
I mean, there have been some reports, but no?
Nope.
No? Okay, so there is no Ebola in India as of now. There might be, of course, because people are aware of this outbreak, aware that there has been an international outbreak. People are probably taking no chances and, testing, doing a basic blood count, as Dr. John and Rajesh suggested. But just to inform all of you and to, quell all your doubts, so far India has not had a victim of Ebola within the country, but the basic precautions are basic hygiene and
I think a simple thing
cleanliness.
is to go back to traditional greetings, then you're not shaking hands.
Oh, do this instead of shaking hands?
I think it makes a large difference when you have a very dense population, actually.
Oh my God! No, but I shake hands a lot.
It's habits.
No,
Small habits.
So here's the thing. I mean, by all means, go shake hands. I mean, I've spent a lot of time thinking about tuberculosis.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, how many times do people think about covering their mouths when they're coughing?
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
simple cough etiquette. Simple etiquette of washing your hands after you've kind of had gone to the toilet, or when you've had a touch with a body fluid kind of a thing. I mean, these are basic things that we shouldn't be even in a position to run a risk of not having in place. If we were to do that, I mean, transmission rates of all airborne diseases are dramatic. It'll come down. Tuberculosis is the one which kind of nearly kills about some 400,000 people right now. I mean, that'll come down dramatically.
Right.
Same way with Ebola. Same thing with, the control of mosquitoes. It's not just for dengue. It's there for malaria. It's there for many other things. So some basic things we have to get in place. Personal hygiene, etiquette, infection control in hospital settings, and then vector control by controlling surface water and other vectors like mosquitoes. Those are very, very basic things, and we've got a long way to go.
We've got a long way to go, but the basic things have to be done at a personal level. That
That's
was
right.
Dr. John's comments. Any last comments from you?
Yeah, after the show we will be uploading some information on Ebola on our website. So if anybody wants to go there, they can get the
Please
latest.
do that.
And if they're curious,
And share it with us too. Do it on our portal too, so
okay,
we can. Yeah.
we'll do that. And then
Please,
whether they're in Timbuktu or Washington D.C. or anywhere in India,
that's the power of the internet. Yes.
they can see it. And if they want to talk to a doctor, they can feel free to use our site.
Oh, great. All right. So there you have it. It is deadly. There is no cure. There is no basic prevention other than very simple and very basic personal hygiene. And so far, no Indian has been affected by the Ebola virus within India. So I hope that quells a lot of your fears and anxieties and puts all those rumors to rest. Thank you so much for joining the conversation. If you have any doubts, queries, any feedback that you might want to share with us, please write into us at indiapostlive.com. Send us your audio and video comments. Tweet at @IndiaPostLive and #IndiaPostLive. I would like to thank once again both Rajesh and Dr. John for taking out time to join us for a brief but very informative chat about the Ebola virus. Thank you so much. The conversation continues on IndiaPostLive.com. Bye-bye.